Founder of Stanbic Ibtc Bank PLC, Atedo Peterside, is celebrating the founding staff of the financial service company as it turns 33 years. Well, Peterside took to his official Twitter handle to express gratitude to God for the lives of those who contributed their quota to developing the bank in its formative years. Stanbic Ibtc, formerly known as IBTC, was founded on February 2nd, 1989. The boardroom giant returned to Nigeria in the late 1980s to set up investment banking and trust company, IBTC, at a small office in Marina, Lagos. The investment bank later grew into a giant in the industry.
Well, by 2003, it was listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. In 2004, IBTC merged with Chartered Bank in what became IBTC Chartered Bank, following a recapitalization of Nigerian banks under Charles Soludo, governor of Central Bank at the time. Peterside was CEO from 1989 to 2007. He resigned after a successful merger and acquisition process with Standard Bank of South Africa. Peterside still holds the position of non-executive director on the boards of Standard Bank Group Limited and the Standard Bank of South Africa Limited. Well, the Nigerian entrepreneur, investment banker and economist Atedo Peterside joins us now from Lagos to discuss the achievements of the financial institution, how quality and strategic leadership has played a key role in the company and its contribution to nation building. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight. I must say congratulations. 33 years, the number 33 must be very exciting to you to think that you actually found IBTC, then known as IBTC, of course, at the age of 33. Looking back, what are the high points for you, and how critical was it for you to, engage quality team to start with?
I think the first thing I want to mention is that people say I was 33 years old and I was young. But the truth is that it's hardly ever said, but every other person in the bank was younger than me. So at 33, I was the oldest person. So IBTC was really an institution that was built by Nigerian youths. Think about an institution where the oldest person is 33. Now, the reason they were younger than me was not because there was a policy against hiring older people. It was just that at the beginning, the only people that wanted to work under a 33-year-old was Nigerian youths, were Nigerian youths. So those who were applying were those who were 20, 24, 25, the odd 30-year-old and so on. So we started a bank and built it entirely from the sweat of youths. So when I look back, it's a confirmation of what Nigerian youths can do. And I'm happy to see that today, in some other sectors, in the creatives, fintech, and so on, Nigerian youths are doing great things.
About the Nigerian youths thing, I mean, at 33, what a beautiful age, and the fact that you had younger ones. How has the staff support been, and what leadership principles, or if you like, system has enabled stability, sustainability, and continuity in running Stanbic, and how can that be extrapolated to leadership in the wider perspective of the country?
Okay, I think very good question. You know, we had a shared vision, and that's very important, because if you're working together with some people, imagine a team of people rowing in the Olympic Games in the canoe. If one or two people are pulling out of sync, you won't do very well. We had a cohesive team. We had a shared vision. We were all hungry and wanted to succeed. And so even when one or two people were not pulling their weight, there was peer group pressure. And also, IBTC was driven by merit. It was a meritocracy. So even when some people joined and they could not meet up, everybody knew, and there was pressure on them to either, improve, get better, or if they couldn't, eventually they had to leave. Nowadays, it's difficult to convince Nigerians that they should do many things on merit. About one of the few areas where we accept merit is when it comes to a football team. Super Eagles, people agree that they should put forward your best 11. Anything else, people want to abandon merit and hope for the best. So IBTC was all about merit. And so there are lessons there for youth, lessons there for the nation.
And what would you say are the lessons that we can actually glean from? Because it looks like you were really, really conscious. I mean, you've used two terms here, meritocracy and peer review, and that seems to be lacking when it comes to leadership recruitment in Nigeria, if we're to, extrapolate, like my colleague Ndi has just said. Let me ask you this question. Does Nigeria have a leadership?
Yes, I was going to.
Yes, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to mention that, interestingly, whilst pursuing merit, we also had diversity. There were women, there were men, right from the beginning, on merit. Within a very short time, virtually, in fact, all the geopolitical zones in the country were represented. I remember at the board level, even when the size of the board was only 5 members, they were drawn across 4 geopolitical zones. So I laugh today when almost, more than 3 decades later, when people make excuses like they couldn't find people for the geopolitical zone and things like that. What they really mean is that they want to rig everything in favor of a particular group or the other. So the point I'm making is that if you pursue merits properly and fiercely, to the extent that you're only hiring 2 people, 3 people, and so on, you may find that they come from anywhere in the country. So IBTC was never dominated by one ethnic group either. Again, there are lessons there.
That really should interest everyone, and that brings me to this particular question. What's your take on the issue of restructuring and the angling for a president to come from a particular part of the country against one who probably has what one could call the magic wand, to make things really, really work the way they should?
Okay, if you're talking about Nigerian presidency, which I don't know what that has to do directly with IBTC, but I'll just say something there. I think the origin of zoning in Nigeria came from PDP, right from 1999. And the logic of the zoning there was that PDP would zone presidency to the north, or they would zone it to the south. When they zoned it to the north, they expected all the geopolitical zones in the north to bring their best candidates. In 1999, it was zoned to the south. And therefore, General Obasanjo from the southwest ran, Alex Tekweme, Philip Asiodu, and a number of Graham Douglas from the south. They all took part in the race. Now, I think the logic of zoning across for the whole north or the whole south was that if you zone only to one geopolitical zone, you limit your options more. If you zone it to the entire south or the entire north, it's highly unlikely that in the entire south or in the entire north, you will not find some very strong candidates. So by zoning it to the entire south, they encourage the best of the south to come out. And then the next time they were zoned to the north, and they encourage the best of the north to come out. When people try and kill the zoning argument and start using merit to try and kill it, hey, it's a bit insulting to think that the entire south in Nigeria does not have people who are very competent, or indeed the entire north. So I don't think you can use concerns about merit when it comes to zoning in such a broad way. If you were zoning something to a very small group, then you can worry whether they may have the right quality. So as far as I'm concerned, the original logic behind zoning was to give the whole nation a sense of belonging, it was almost like power shifting after 8 years or something like that, from south to north, and then later on from north to south, to give everybody a sense of belonging. Look, there are countries that are arranged that way in terms of making sure that the leadership, rotates. Even in Nigeria, there are some states, I believe Delta State, the governorship was moving between three zones, following, coming turn by turn. So people can make arrangements sometimes to ensure that unity and a sense of belonging is encouraged, especially when you have a sort of fragile federation like we've had. The other comment I will make in favor of zoning in a broad sense, north versus south, is that if you make the mistake of having a president who looks like he has made the nation more divisive during his tenure, then it becomes doubly important for power to shift to the other half of the nation, because you want to assuage fears and you want to sort of reinstate confidence in the country called Nigeria. So we have to be very careful thinking you can leave the presidency in the same zone for 16 years. At the end of that period, there might be no Nigeria.
And that seems to be the challenge as we move into 2023, where Nigeria is in desperate need of a leader that will give that sense of oneness and unity to Nigerians. What kind of leader really does Nigeria need? And with the present temperature, can that leader really emerge? And what would you say, or how exactly can that right leadership emerge within this political environment that we find ourselves in? Are there reforms that need to be made for it to happen?
I think the most important reforms include how we carry out elections. The Electoral Act should take care of that. The most important single change there being counting votes at the polling booth and transmitting the results, so there's a sense of integrity in the subsequent figures that you hear. But I think when you're talking about what kind of leader we need, we have to go back to the basics. You must do background checks. You don't want any surprises. I think if anybody wants to run for president, in America they say it is the day you try and run for president that your entire history will come out. Every skeleton in your cupboard will come out. We need to do the same here. Then we need to ensure that we're looking at people that have the capacity, the competence, integrity, people who, team players, people who understand leadership. I often tell people that, look, it is dangerous, I repeat, it's dangerous to put somebody in office like a president and you don't know anything about their leadership style. Before you put somebody in that exalted office, you should be able to almost write a book about their leadership style. There are many human beings that don't even know what their own leadership style may be until you give them absolute power, because absolute power corrupts. So it's important that you have people who are tried and tested, competent, knowledgeable, people who understand that there's more to Nigeria than their own, personal friends or ethnic group and so on. Because we've seen people, they get into office and eventually they get surrounded by their own people alone, thereby making the nation appear, disunited and lots of tension. And I think also you want fatherly figures who look at the entire nation as their children, people who truly believe in a level playing field. You don't want the president that's going to come into Nigeria to try and tilt things in favor of his own ethnic group. That's a disaster and a disgrace. We ought to put such things behind us forever. So we want to set higher standards. We want to learn from past mistakes.
Zoning then, because you are speaking in favor of zoning. as the answer to uniting Nigeria. But do you think really it is time for Nigeria to begin to jettison the idea of zoning? Because when you talk about zoning and meritocracy at the same time, in the same breath, it looks like one is contradicting oneself. Because as it is now, even the states are talking about zoning, zone it to Ekiti South, zone it to Ekiti North, and all of that. Don't you think zoning has been taken too far, and it's time really to put meritocracy at the forefront of the search for a leader?
No, I think I already explained that a bit. I am in favor of zoning if you are talking about zoning it to the entire South or to the entire North. Look, the entire South is bigger than many countries. The entire North is bigger than many countries. So you cannot use the argument that in the entire South, if you bring out the best candidate, the candidate may not be good enough. That's an insult on the whole of the South. You cannot argue the same for the North either, that in the entire North, you cannot find a candidate. I think the point I'm making is that even a very good leader, if his section of the country has been in power for 8 years, if he walks in the 9th year from the same section of the country, there will be suspicion, there will be tension. That leader may not be as effective as if there was a power shift, and therefore there was a sense of the whole country supporting the new leader. So, and also I think, I've said it earlier, you see, if you are coming out of an 8-year period where there was a perfect sense of fair play, then things like zoning would not be that important. But if you are coming out of 8 years where the country has become more divisive, then you've got to find some way to diffuse that tension. And one of those ways is to move the presidency to the other half of the country, so that you don't get some people trying to perpetuate themselves and their group and their clique for more than 8 years. That, you may find, is a more worrying issue than any fears you may have that the entire South will not find somebody competent.
All right, let me bring you back to issues that have to do with banking, all right, your celebration. You were appointed head of a committee set up to develop a code of best practices for public companies in Nigeria, now by the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2003. What was the experience like? Is what your committee came up with being implemented? And then there are no smooth roads. You have to go through flat roads and mountains and all that. So tell us your highs and lows if you look back to your organization when you had dire straits, and what turned the tide for you? Those two questions.
Okay, on the code of corporate governance, it was actually unusual for somebody as young as I was to be put in charge of a committee to come up with the first code of corporate governance for a nation. But it was forced on me. I mean, I never asked for it. In the wisdom of those in charge, they decided I was the best person to head the effort, and they had a committee, and they imposed the chairmanship on me. I actually refused the appointment for a long time, and there was a stalemate, and there was so much pressure that I accepted. So the thing to remember is that I was less than 50 years old, but their argument was that they wanted somebody to chair the committee who looked to be an apostle of good governance himself. And that was the logic why they thought I should do it, because they thought they liked what they saw in IBTC, which was founded, I was the founding CEO. So in effect, what they were saying is that we want to take somebody from an institution that has good governance and then ask him to come and help us to replicate it for the whole nation. So that was the logic, But I don't want to give the impression that I did it alone. We had a committee. I was just the chairman. We had some very strong members of the committee, and the lessons that came from that whole effort. You see, for many countries, the most difficult time is the first time you put up a code of corporate governance. That was the Those were the building blocks that we put in place. Subsequently, they've made changes. But the first is the most difficult because people even questioned why we should even talk at all about corporate governance in Nigeria. So you have to get people together and make them understand, hey, the world has gone beyond this. You cannot just run companies for yourself, disregard stakeholders and all that. So, I know I've spent so much time on the first question, so let me just stop there.
And so the second question, well, I was even asking whether that is being implemented now around, but the second question is, people go through highs and lows. We want to find out whether there were such times when you were in dire straits or the company was in dire straits, and what turned the tide for you or for the organization?
Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, look, I wouldn't use dire straits, but every company goes through highs and lows, and we were very resilient. I will also say perhaps we were lucky also, because we had a good team. But Nigeria, one of the biggest things is managing the regulator. If you're in a sector that is regulated, in the financial sector, where IBTC was operating, we had multiple regulators. We had the SEC for capital market, we had the central bank for banking, we had the PenCom on the pension side, and so on, because we also had IBTC was operating across the spectrum. So we were dealing with multiple regulators. So I remember, at various times, one regulator will come with an issue. Then later on, we even had other agents, other regulators like Financial Reporting Council and other people like that. So really, the lows came when you disagreed with a regulator. On the pure business side, we never had any real problems. We could handle the market. We could take what the market brought. What we couldn't take sometimes was decisions of some regulators, which invariably were incorrect, and in due course we were proven right. Because people know that I went public on a number of occasions in disagreements with regulators. But luckily all those things ended up in our favor. Because at the end of the day, they say the truth sets you free.
And you came into the banking sector when the financial sector was more or less fully deregulated. You went into investment banking. Would you say that Nigeria, the banking and financial sector, has reached its peak and it's time to move on to another level? What level would that be in a way that can actually add value to the Nigerian economy? In 30 seconds, if you can.
In 30 seconds, what I'll tell you that the world has changed from 1989. Today, what you have is that you have banks, you have fintechs, you have big tech, you have telecommunications companies. Sometimes there's an overlap between these four groups. So our regulators have to get a lot more creative to understand now that with technology, these things have converged. So if you're not careful, a telecom company will start trying to behave like a bank, or a fintech company will start trying to behave like a bank, and so on. So you have to define the boundaries as best you can. But it's a lot more challenging, and I hope that they're really up to the task. Otherwise, you can have crazy rules and crazy outcomes arising because even big tech can come in and effectively do banking without having the burden of having to cope with central bank. So you've got to make sure that the regulation is up to date with the 21st century.
Right, thank you so much. Atedo Peterside, the entrepreneur, investment banker, and economist, for being on News Night.